What is going on, guys? This is Miasin. So I really wanted to make a video on how to beat Fire King because a lot of people are maybe wondering, the deck is gaining a lot in popularity and will become even more popular once we get Phantom Nightmare. And this deck is very annoying already, but it does have flaws, obviously. It's not perfect. It's not super explosive. At the end of the day, it is a mid-range deck. It's not a combo deck. So there's limits to what it can achieve. It doesn't make like super unbreakable boards, but it can play with a lot of hand shops, so it's... yeah, that could be a huge inconvenience because sometimes you can actually play through the board, but you don't play through the hand shop, so you can still lose to like, very basic stuff. And again, if you don't know what you're doing against the deck, it's going to make things even harder. So step number one is to at least understand how the deck functions and also understand the different builds and everything that people are trying to do, and then you adapt for the playstyle and the typical deck list that people are playing. Which, I want to say at the moment, I don't think a lot of people are playing with the Snake Eyes, but that will eventually be the norm. At the moment, it's not super consistent because, they're not really good starters. I mean, they're extenders, obviously, that you can get off of the Abel Star and original Sinful Exposed Snake Eye that allows you to make a decent board. But, again, they do add bricks to the deck because there's no Populace yet. So the Snake Eye engine is not at its peak. Yeah, today I will, of course, give you guys some pointers on how to beat this deck, but before we go any further, make sure you smash the like and subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. And now let's get right into it. Alright, so it goes without saying, but Triple Tactic Thrust is extremely good against the deck, and the reason for that is because they're always using monster effects against you. Even if they don't want to, they're typically triggering Barong and Ponyx on your standby phase, and these effects are mandatory, so even if you don't want to trigger them, you still have to. So yeah, if your opponent has destroyed a Barong and has not revived it back yet, after, then he has to trigger it. Same thing with the Ponyx, but Ponyx, I want to say, because it's the fact that it's level 1, it's easier to not destroy last because you can destroy it and then revive back with a Flamberge, and then you link it off, and then it doesn't remember that it was destroyed. So that's how it works. It's for the physical copy of Ponyx that it remembers the destruction, not for the name of Legendary Fire King Ponyx. So do keep that in mind. Try not to get cheated, actually, with this card. Honestly, the whole Fire King strategy is really easy to cheat with it. Unfortunately, because there are a lot of weird rules with this deck, like the trigger effect rule of you can only use one effect of a trigger effect of a monster that special summons itself that lists the hand as a potential location. So in other words, if you destroy a fire monster, you can't trigger both Ponyx and Garunix, or trigger like Garunix and Hanuman, the level 4 that negates spells and traps. Can't do that. You can only summon one of them. Same thing with Barong. They all have like the same effect. Literally, there's like 10 cards that do the same thing. So also do keep that in mind. Sometimes it's not even about having the right cards to beat your opponent, but at least understanding the rules so that your opponent doesn't do something illegal that gives him a huge advantage. But yeah, Thrust is very good because they're always using monster effects. You can get pretty much any normal spell or normal trap. Evenly is one of them, but I don't recommend it. I think Cosmic Cyclone is better, but I will go into details later on. Soul Release is one of the really popular ones because you can hit your opponent's Garunix or the Barong so that he misses out on the recursion for the rest of the duel, and also for the Ponyx if he doesn't recycle it back, and some other level 1 so that if the Flamberge is sent to the grave, there will be no revival because Flamberge has to very specifically revive back 2 level 1 fire monsters from the grave. It's not up to 2 level 1s, so that is also very relevant. There's pretty much no way for your opponent to play around that, and again, that is another thing that you have to know. It's really important to read all of their cards. Again, they're very new, so, no wonder people are doing so well with a deck. Nobody knows what the cards do, so, yeah, you're gonna have a huge advantage just understanding your opponent's deck better than he understands his own deck. But yeah, Soul Release will especially become better next format when the Link 3 monster will come out. Promethean Princess, it's a Grave Interruption, so that's very, it's an interruption in the graveyard, but it doesn't do anything about the graveyard. It destroys monsters on the field, so... yeah, keep that in mind. Soul Release is still decent right now. It's a Thrust target, but it's just a one-of. In the future, you could actually play 3 Soul Release, so that's not too bad. The Furniture monsters in the Labyrinth deck can discard the Shizu monsters, well, especially Keldo and Mudora, because Agido and Kelbeck aren't obviously any good against this deck. But Mudora and... well, I mean, they could be in the Tier Elements deck, but yeah, for a different reason. Mudora and Keldo being able to shuffle back your opponent's Barong and Ponyx on draw phase, so before they get to trigger, will make your opponent go potentially neg 2. So that's actually very good. You don't necessarily have to use them as interruption because your opponent needs to generate advantage on your turn too. The Fire King monsters, they're kind of like slower Burning Abyss in a way. I mean, basically, the way some people are saying Barong is like a Skarm, but on the next standby phase, and then, you know, the Kirin is a Seer that destroys a card. So yeah, you can compare them to Burning Abyss monsters or Unchained that trigger just a little later and do some things that are slightly different, but they all float in a different way. They all kind of do something when they're destroyed, except for two. These two monsters would be Garunix and the Hanuman, which nobody plays, and I don't recommend playing that card. But yeah, anyways, just know that interrupting their graveyard is very good. So DD Crew would be fine, but it's not good enough, even though it's an interruption. You're better off probably with Soul Release at this point. DD Crow is just not strong enough, you know, it's not, it only takes care of one card, but this deck with minimal investment can generate a crazy amount of advantage, so that's actually very annoying. But yeah, the Snake Eye engine is not super popular, so you don't necessarily always have to know what to do against it, but if your opponent goes for like a Snake Eye Ash, you don't Ash the on-field effect to search, you Ash the effect to transform into another Snake Eye monster. That is the correct effect to Ash, because there's two effects that are Ashable on Ash, but yeah, only one of them is like really relevant. And Imperm against this card is actually much better, so if anything, yeah, that's infinitely more important. And yeah, Flamberge, there's pretty much nothing that you can do about it, but one thing that I will have to say about Flamberge is that if you're relying on cards like Evenly and Lightning Storm, if you hand trap your opponent before, your opponent can go Flamberge to equip, to place one of your cards in your, monsters on your field or in your graveyard in your spell and trap zone, and that will make Lightning Storm and Evenly dead because you now have a card on the field. So do keep that in mind, it's actually very dangerous. Anyways, you also have to understand how they can interrupt you. So obviously, when the Kirin is destroyed, they can revive back a Fire King monster from the graveyard or hand, and then destroy a card on the field as a target. And it happens on resolution, so it bypasses skill drain. So in other words, they can play skill drain, and that's actually something that they're doing. The pure version is doing that, and it's pretty annoying. The deck again floats a lot. It's just minimal investment, so you don't really, you know, need to care too much about. I mean, you don't really have to care if your cards die. You're always getting them back anyways. Garunix is basically how this deck just never runs out of gas. Every time your monster dies, like, you always revive it back from the grave. Doesn't get banished when it leaves the field, so you don't even have to use it as an Xyz summon for the Garunix Eternity. And then when it is normal or special, you get to destroy a Fire BBW from the deck, or from your hand or field, but usually it's going to be from the deck, and then it gains attack as an added bonus. So you can also out like towers with the Garunix because it's going to gain a lot of attack. And yeah, the Arvata is one of their other in-engine interruptions, because obviously the Kirin was the other one, but they can also go into a Masquerena and then into an SP Little Knight to banish two cards. But the Arvata can negate a monster effect and then destroy a Fire BBW from, no, actually any fire monster in your hand or face of field. But then when it is destroyed and sent to the grave, then you can revive back a Fire BBW. Any of them, not even necessarily like a Fire King monster, but you're not really playing any other Fire Beast, Beast Warrior, Wing Beast, unless you're playing the Tri Brigade package. Then you can actually revive back the kit, which is actually kind of cute, honestly. Another noteworthy thing is, I have to say that Sanctuary is not really the kind of card that you're trying to, I mean, you can destroy it if your opponent activates it. Like, if you have the Labyrinth Field spell, it's this card right here. Hold on a second. There you go. And then you got like Welcome Labyrinth, you activate that, and then the Labyrinth just immediately destroys it. But on the resolution, if your opponent places the Fire King Island with the Sanctuary, you can no longer really destroy it, because the Fire King, the Sanctuary can actually protect the island by destroying another fire monster, so that's actually very annoying. And that's the reason why Cosmic Cyclone is much more efficient at stopping them than cards like, I don't know, well, I mean MST, I guess, but yeah, kind of obvious, but yeah, sometimes it doesn't really matter too much because they're kind of the same, but yeah, no, you're definitely trying to banish her. For the hand traps, most of them are just a little mid. Imperm is not too bad again if they're playing the Snake Eye version, but if you can Imperm the Diabell Star, that's actually also not too bad. But usually you Imperm the first thing on site. Sometimes like, Imperming the Ponix is just not good enough because they hard draw the Sanctuary or the Fire King Island. You could also Imperm the Garunix, because that way they don't destroy the Barong. But if they hard draw the Kirin, then it doesn't matter. So it's like, again, it's a mid-range deck, not a combo deck, so regardless of what you Imperm, if they hard draw the card that they needed, you're screwed. And Nibiru is also really bad because they apply pressure very early, like before 5 summons, because they summon Garunix and then they destroy the Barong. And then even if you Nibiru them, even if they pass on 0 monsters on the board, they're still searching the Kirin on the next standby phase with the Barong and then recycling back the Ponix. And then they can destroy the Ponix, revive back the Garunix, and then destroy Kirin from deck. and then revive back a fire monster, get some searches with the Onyx, and then they can easily just interrupt you by destroying a card with a Kirin, potentially overlaying with the Sanctuary into the rank 8 Fire King monster, and blow up the whole board again. So yeah, Nibiru is actually just dog shit. Droll and Logbird is actually much better. Even though the deck sometimes just doesn't care whatsoever, it will usually lose to Droll, because if they have to go Onyx to search the Sanctuary, then the Fire King Island will not be able to search. So that's annoying for them, and obviously if they have Pot of Prosperity, then that's also another bad thing. And if they're playing Fenrir and then they go Fenrir, search Fenrir, they are also playing into Droll and Logbird. So I want to say they're pretty much almost always playing into Droll, unless they go like normal summon Arvata and then go into Island. At this point, they have like a really good hand. But also, if they go like Sanctuary into Island and then get their first search for Garunix that way, your Droll is no longer of any importance because your opponent doesn't need any searches past the Island search. Not the search of Island, but the search from Island. So the search of a Fire King monster, basically. So yeah, another annoying thing with the Droll. And then for the Ash, the only thing that's really worth ashing would be the Fire King Island. Honestly, nothing else. You don't ash the Onyx, obviously, that's just really bad. And Shifter is insane because unlike the Unchained cards, the Fire King monsters, they really do have to be sent to the graveyard. They're old, it's destroyed and sent to the graveyard if they want to trigger. But yeah, anyways, some other cards that I actually think are extremely insane would be Shared Ride. Again, I already mentioned how Barong and Onyx, their effects are mandatory. So Barong has to search from deck to hand, and Onyx has to recycle back from graveyard to hand. So if you Shared Ride, you are guaranteed 2 searches, well, 2 draws, sorry, with Shared Ride. So you're always going +1 if you see a Shared Ride, if they're destroying these 2 cards. So that's actually pretty cool. But even if you're going first and you set Shared Ride as an interruption, they're searching a lot, and they're also recycling back a lot from the graveyard. They can recycle back from the graveyard with a Sunlight Wolf on your turn. They can search from the deck by the effect of Ash and by the Onyx. It's actually really easy to search, maybe to draw maybe 4 times with Shared Ride, even going second. So Shared Ride, ironically, is almost a board breaker. It literally helps you out beating them. So I really like that. And obviously, if they're drooling you on the Shared Ride, they're also hurting themselves because, yeah, they're not going to be getting the full value off of their own cards. But they do get their searches on standby phase, not on draw phase. So that's the reason why Drool will be live. So yeah, keep that in mind. Shared Ride can be a little dangerous. Mistaken Arrest might be a little safer. But the only deck that can really afford the luxury of playing Mistaken Arrest would be Unchained. And even going second, it might be a little riskier. Because if you can't get your search off of the Unchained Soul Lore of Yama or the Abomination's Prison, your deck might be a little less consistent. So I don't really recommend Mistaken Arrest going second. Shared Ride is much better. But if you're going first, obviously Mistaken Arrest is game. It's so good against them. It's really dangerous. So yeah. I forgot to mention that the other interruption in engine that they have, so obviously the Kirin Pop, the Negate from Arvata, they also have the Skyburn to pop, but usually they're searching that as in their follow-up turn, not on their turn 1. Unless they already hard drew the Sanctuary, then their Onyx can search the Skyburn, and that can destroy a bunch of cards. And this card is worded with a destroy them, not a destroy like both or destroy those targets. So if one of the targets leaves the field, the card still tries to resolve as much as possible and still tries to destroy some other cards. So that's another interesting thing about this card. It's a pretty good card, honestly. It deals with a lot of problems and also helps them dodge Effect Veiler, Impermanence, and stuff like that. Kirin also helps them dodge negation stuff on your monsters. So yeah, they have 2 ways actually to dodge these kind of effects. Anyways, Evenly, like I said, kind of sucks. Their end board is not a bunch of cards on the field. It's really just Sanctuary with a Fire King Island, and then Sunlight Wolf and Masquerena, and then they try to go into like an SP or like an Appaloosa on your turn. Evenly, they will just keep the Masquerena, so it just does nothing, and then they can go Kirin, destroy Flamberge, revive back 2 level 1 monsters, and then revive back the Garunix, pop the Kirin, summon back a monster, and then they can make like a big-ass Appaloosa or like an SP. So yeah, Evenly just doesn't really deal with anything. If anything, Cosmic Cyclone is much better. You can Cosmic the Fire King Island, and then it has a mandatory effect to destroy every monster you control. And the Masquerena will not really be able to go into like an Undestructible by a card effect monster because whichever monster is summoned off of Masquerena is only Undestructible by card effect by your opponent's card effects. Because of the fact that Fire King Island destroys yourself, it's gonna be a different story. So yeah, Cosmic Cyclone, I want to say, is much better against them. And also, it's an interruption. It's really good going first if you draw it against them. And then Ultimate Slayer is decent, but it's not insane. It only deals with the Masquerena. So you send a Link monster, preferably the Tri-Brigade Arms Busefulus 2. And then you send the Garura, so you get rid of their Masquerena and you draw a card. So you're basically going +0 or -0, but your opponent goes -1. So in the absolute, you're going +1 because your opponent loses a card. And he loses 2 interruptions when you think about it, without you losing anything at all. Because you're going from 6 cards to 6 cards, since you're drawing 1 in exchange of your Ultimate Slayer. It's also not once per turn, so drawing multiple copies would not be too bad. And then your opponent loses like one of the best interruptions, and then everything else destroys. So if you're playing a deck like Unchained, you don't really have to care about the other interruptions, which are just the Kirin to destroy, and maybe the Garunix to send, the secret, the rank 8 Garunix. But then usually they're not going to have that on top of everything else, because they will have to go Snake Eye Ash to send the Sanctuary in order to evolve into Flamberge. Otherwise, they would have to like send something else, so that's kind of neggy. At least right now, while there is no Populace. So yeah, again, another thing that you have to keep into consideration. But yeah, very important to know. Anyways, triple Tactic Talons. Yeah, obviously that's another decent card. You can look at your opponent's hand, and if you do that, your opponent kind of has to go Kirin effect, and then you're at least forcing this out, but your opponent has to use a monster effect on the main phase preemptively, which is a different story. Sometimes you already have to play into a board for that to happen, or you have to get hit by a hand trap. So that's my issue with Talents, but it does pair very, very nicely with Ultimate Slayer. So if you get drolled after drawing with a Garura, then at least you can go Talents, look at the hand, and then at least like somewhat try to play through it. And then again, your opponent lost the Masquerena, you forced out the Kirin very early. So these two cards, in tandem with each other, they work really nicely to, I want to say, pretty much break the full board without you losing too many resources. Even if you use the effect to steal a monster, it's also not too bad. Like, you could steal the Sunlight Wolf and then link it off into like your own monster, or if your opponent summons something to the zone it points to, you can recycle something back. If you are playing Fire King yourself, this is one of the good plays that you can do, and then you can link climb up and do some nice things. So yeah, the talents are just overall very good going second. And again, these cards are easy to search thanks to Triple Tactic Thrust. So that is the beauty with normal spell cards, at least against Fire King. Call by the Grave, obviously a good card. It's kind of like a DD Crow, but it also works against hand traps, so it's decent. DD Designator, this is kind of like a Mind Crush, but as a spell card, but it's risky because if you call a Kirin, your opponent can chain Kirin, and then you have to banish a random card from your hand, so that's not ideal. And then Summoning Curse is another really interesting card that I wanted to cover. So the cool thing about Summoning Curse is that you are punishing your opponent for trying to play on your own turn, so going second, this card is still good. At least if you're playing a deck like Labyrinth, because you're not special summoning yourself, at least not too much. So your opponent, if he wants to like go IP into SP, he is forced to banish the Summoning Curse, nothing else, because otherwise he's going to be banishing like a bunch of cards. And then once he goes like Kirin effect to like destroy something, and then revive back the Garunix, and then like do even more plays, the Summoning Curse will keep making your opponent banish cards over and over and over, to the point where your opponent will have like literally no follow-up because of Summoning Curse. It is a major inconvenience, and again, paired up with other cards, Summoning Curse has the potential to be extremely good. And obviously, if you're going first, Summoning Curse is the most annoying thing ever. It's like extremely annoying because if they're playing the Snake Eyes, even with the new support like Populace and everything, they have to special summon a lot of monsters, and all their monsters always search, and because of the fact that this is a mandatory effect in Chain Link 1, it goes Chain Link 1 Summoning Curse, and then Chain Link 2 the search card, and then they have to banish a card. So even if they set off their cards, they can't just play around the card by doing that, actually. On the resolution, they're always going to be banishing at least one card from their hand if they're searching, or if they're not, then yeah, they always play with 0 cards in hand, which is really difficult to do. So yeah, Summoning Curse is probably the best floodgate, I want to say, against Fire King. I've been hit by this card once while I was playing the deck, and I was like, whoa, this is like randomly just so good against me right now. But yeah, anyways, another thing that I wanted to mention is that if you Ash your opponent can Hita you, and then revive back the Ash, and when we will get Promethean Princess, this is going to be a problem, because your opponent can Link Climb, and, well, not really Link Climb, but at least get this in the graveyard and in rotation. So also keep that in mind. But yeah, that's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.